Hello and welcome everyone to the Capital Mind podcast. If you'd like to know more about us, visit capitalmind.in, and if you'd like to invest with us, do visit capitalmindwealth.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as the basis for investment decisions. Clients of Capital Mind may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Well, Deepak, thanks for making us come in on a Saturday. I was going to say it was a non-event, but clearly that's not the case a bit. So the budget is out and everyone's attention is on the new income tax provisions. It just seems like good news all around. If you're earning up to 12 lakhs, you now don't pay any income tax. And I guess that benefit extends throughout. So even if you're earning, say, 24 lakhs a year, you're now saving something fairly significant. Could you dive into this? And is the news just too good to be true? Is there some fine print, or is this actually it?
Yeah, there is actually quite an interesting part of how this whole thing operates. They have changed the slabs, and it's only in the new regime. There's an old regime which is essentially for people who want to claim their benefits. That continues to stay exactly as it is. But the new regime, which was a slabbed sequence up till 15 lakh rupees, has moved from the old concept of up to 15 lakh rupees to 24 lakh rupees. So that means your slabs are wider, the tax rates are lower, and effectively up to 12 lakh rupees, there is no tax at all on income. And therefore, that means you used to pay something like 90,000 rupees earlier. Even in the new regime, in this current financial year, you would be paying 90,000 rupees of taxes on a 12 lakh rupee income. You will pay zero from April onwards. And the benefit keeps changing. And so if you earn 24 lakhs, your tax is roughly 3 lakh rupees, which would have been 4 lakh 20,000 rupees. So you're saving 1 lakh 20,000 or 10,000 rupees per month going forward from April onwards. So effectively, that's 10,000 rupees more that the government is putting in your pocket by not having to pay tax if you make more than 24 lakhs per year, and any amount more than 24 lakhs is exactly the same. So you're getting some saving. There is a bit of a confusion on whether they made a statement saying, oh, if you make capital gains, this 12 lakh tax-free does not apply. That's not true, because the way the income tax department is split, there are different types of income. Salary, income from house property, there are a couple of few other things. Capital gains, business income, and other sources. So when you get income in 4 of these areas, they're all added up and taxed at the same slab rate. So whichever slab you come in, you will kind of get the slab rate of that point, and there's a concept of so you make 16 lakhs, then it is like 0 to 4 is 0%, 4 to 8 is something, 8 to 12 is something. So it's not like the first 12 lakhs is tax free. It is just that if you make less than 12 lakhs, that's all is tax free. But otherwise, even if you make 13 lakhs, there is a tax. That tax is as much, I mean, it's about, I think 35 or 40, 75,000 rupees. And that's still a tax saving of 35 compared to what it was earlier. However, if you have capital gains, and that capital gains could be from stocks, from bonds, from houses, from whatever, then that is taxed separately at a separate rate, 12.5 or 20%. So if you make 50 lakh rupees in capital gains and 12 lakh rupees in, I don't know, income from salaries or from business or something like that, that 12 lakh rupees is tax free. It's the 50 lakh that will anyway be charged at slab rates, at the capital gains tax rates, which is a different slab. So it doesn't mean that if you have capital gains, something here does not apply. They're two separate concepts. They're taxed separately, and the 12 lakh limit applies here. This is great, because actually it puts a lot of money in your pocket, regardless of how much money you make. Of course, you are earning less than 7 lakhs, there's no difference to you. Anything more than 7 lakh rupees per year, the tax saving for you at a personal basis is great. Of course, this does not mean that when come April or come when your anniversary, you don't need to ask for a salary hike, because you already got one, right? But because effectively 1,20,000 rupees on 24 lakhs is 5%. So effectively the government has given you a 5% salary hike just like that. But it just changes the way you look at your take-home income from April onwards.
So 10,000 rupees a month, it looks like it's not too good to be true. And if you're earning more than 24 lakhs, so even if you're earning say 1 crore or 2 crores, you are still saving this amount. I mean, it may be insignificant as your numbers add up, but the fact is that this is a savings that comes to everyone, and it obviously matters more to people lower on the income ladder. So the question that obviously comes to mind is, what are the ripple effects of this, or what are the second order effects of this? There is clearly more money in everyone's pocket. What are they going to do with this now? Does this change how they consume, how they invest? You were talking about some unintended impacts on fixed deposits, unintended impacts on the stock market as well. So can we get into that? 10,000 rupees more in everyone's pocket. What happens now?
This is great. Actually, the reason why this is very interesting is because what are you going to do with that 10,000? And if you take that 10,000 and say, well, you know what, this is great because more money will come into the stock market. The answer is, wait, hang on. Look at this from a different perspective. Since up to 12 lakh rupees is completely tax-free. A person retiring today who might be looking at deploying their money to get returns, they can get approximately 8% as a senior citizen interest rate. That means they could put 1.5 crores into a fixed deposit, and that 1.5 crores would be yielding 12 lakh rupees at 8%, and 12 lakh rupees is completely tax-free. So the first 1.5 crores you have, if you have no other income, it's perfect to just put it just into fixed deposits. It is in fact more tax efficient than putting it into a stock market or any other income where you're going to get taxed at least 12.5%. So 12.5% is much greater than 0%. So technically, you should not put your first 1.5 crores. So this is now a new series of advice that will probably start coming in. It's like the first 1.5 crores after your retirement goes to fixed deposits. It's safe, it gives you income, it gives you guaranteed 1 lakh per month income for no tax and no risk. The risk starts after that. So essentially it means the people who come to the stock market were earlier coming because, hey, I'm getting higher returns, but B, I'm getting taxed lesser. Now it's like, no, for the smaller end of the society, it's not going to be the lower tax amount. It's going to be only the returns that should drive them to come here. So obviously a few people who are on this I want both thing will probably shift to fixed deposits. The rest, but if you're richer, if you have more than 1.5 crores in a corpus of any size, or now or later, or you have income from other sources, a salary and so on, the minute your salaries have crossed 12 lakh rupees or 15 lakh rupees, stock still remains a good investment. So if you're earning 24 or 25 lakh rupees, you're going to want to make more money off of investing in stocks, investing in the bond markets, investing in mutual funds and so on. So I think the attractiveness remains for people who are richer, but it has reduced for people who are not quite as rich. And when I say not quite as rich, I'm saying 1.5 crores of corpus, which is significantly rich from this thing.
Also per person, right? So if it's a two-person couple and you have 3 crores, you could potentially pull this off where each person has 1.5. So this is now a very large number.
It's very large number. And you know what's interesting is the India's per capita income is what, $2,000, $2,500, maybe 3,000. That's 2 lakh rupees a year. So if you had 4 times the Indian per capita income as income, you would not be paying any tax. It starts only after that. This is quite dramatic if you ask me, because it changes the way you kind of think about investing and spending.
So since you brought that up, how do you now think of investing and spending? You have this extra money in your pocket. For most people listening to this podcast, it's about 10,000 rupees a month. How do you change your direction of it? I mean, today when we looked at the stock market, it was a light trading day, but consumer goods stocks seemed to go up as an initial reaction. Nothing really fell that much. What do you have to say to that?
So, I mean, you started off with this, but I think it's a travesty that we have to come in on a Friday, on a Saturday to do this, because they opened the stock markets but not the bond markets, and therefore FIs aren't participating, therefore mutual funds aren't participating. So you're listening to a thin market giving you feedback about something that is perhaps should not be given as much importance as it is in terms of budget. But here is the interesting thing. The markets may have responded by saying, you got 10,000 more rupees, you're going to do more Zomato orders or Swiggy or whatever it is. But I think that's a little early to say. I mean, look at the way people are. People will invest a little bit of this money and they will spend a little bit of this money. The investment part of it we've talked about. There's probably a move to fixed deposits. There's probably a move to this and so on. But there's another part of it. There's the ULIPs. They got a fillip in the budget by saying, listen, the earlier problem was that if you invested 1.5, if you invested more than 2.5 lakh rupees per year as premium into a ULIP policy, you were told that at the end, whenever the maturity amount comes, since you invested more than 2.5 lakh rupees, all of that income is taxed as income from other sources, which is added to your income. And it could be taxed as much as 35, 39%, whatever that number is. Now you're thinking, well, why have I invested so much money to just get taxed at 35%, whereas I could be in a mutual fund which is taxed only at 12.5. This budget has changed it and said, well, you know what, we didn't intend you to tax you at 39%. We'll tax you only at 12.5%, and that too only on the profit instead of on the whole sum assured, which was what it was earlier. This will make ULIPs a little bit more attractive. So it's not necessarily that stocks will get attractive. It may be ULIPs, mutual funds, and so on directly. So the investment, I think, will be spread across. More interestingly, what will they spend on? And that's the reason I'm saying it's interesting is because India has been too much of a savings economy. We've tried to, I think we started off becoming a spending economy only in the last 2 or 3 years. And now you're seeing tourism increase quite dramatically across the board. And one of the reasons why tourism has increased is because people have more money in their pockets and facilities have started to become available. But it's still tremendously underwhelming. You look at a Kumbh Mela, I don't know, 15 crore people come there, and when they come there are issues, people are crowded, we don't have enough facilities. I don't understand why we don't have enough facilities in some of our most visited religious places. I understand, where other things are. Why do we have to live in, tents, which of course have air conditioners, there's nothing wrong with it. In ecologically protected areas, I understand that. But should we not have more investments into the capex, into hotels, into stuff like that in these places? So the consumption increase will probably fuel more capital expenditure increase also in terms of infrastructure increase. And I think consumer durables, like 10,000 rupees a month is half the EMI for a small car. And perhaps a medium-sized car as well. So you might actually find that people buy more durables, do more travel, have more experiential things than buying more toothpaste. So, at some level, I don't understand why toothpaste stocks are going up, but then I could never understand toothpaste stocks. But I do think that there is more demand. There should be more demand for cars. There should be more demand for two-wheelers, and that we should keep pushing that. We should look at that as the a place where people will spend.
Okay. So we've covered the income tax provisions and you've explained them well. We've sort of thought through the ramifications of this extra money coming into people's pockets. But there's a lot more in the budget as well, right? So anything else you'd like to add about, say, unintended consequences of these income tax changes, or about what was the other fine print in the budget, other impacts on other sectors, other schemes, and so on?
So, like I said, one of the consequences is that people will probably have more capex in tourism and consumption areas, which has not seen that much capex in the past. But there's other areas. They talked about inland shipping. Inland shipping is actually, according to me, a huge thing. And now, if you go to any country that has access to the sea, to the shore, you find that they have a relatively large amount of maritime traffic bound, whether it is cargo, whether it is, strangely, what we send on a ship we call cargo, and what we send by road we call it a shipment. So I don't know why that happens, but anyway, so interestingly, we haven't really pushed our inland shipping concepts, whether it is for cargo or whether it's for people. Meaningfully, you don't think of traveling from say Mangalore or Cochin to Bombay on a cruise, or even Cochin to Goa on a cruise or something like that. It's only to Lakshadweep because there's almost no other way to get there, or use a plane. But I think this will spur investments onto shipping, both from a shipping people who build ships to people who all build the equipment on that ships, maybe the motors, maybe the internal equipment, maybe a lot of the stuff that goes on the ship itself. So that will actually spur capex there. They're putting some specific measures. They're addressing manufacturing across the board. They're saying we want to manufacture more in India. So if you're manufacturing an EV, I'm going to reduce the customs duty on all the materials you need to import, like cobalt and so on, but make the EV here. If you want to, or EV battery here, make the EV here itself, will give you a benefit. So they're giving benefits for both sectors, and manufacturing as a whole, MSME manufacturing is getting impetus in terms of loans, government guarantees. There is a bunch of MSME schemes. They push startups quite a bit. They said, well, we'll create another 10,000 crores as a fund of funds that goes downstream into other VC funds. So instead of directly identifying startups, the government is identifying VC funds to give money to, which will then further invest into startups. So I think that's another interesting place where they've kind of pushed things around. And then downstream of investing in manufacturing is you'll invest your defense capex. Now the capex they say hasn't gone up, but it's gone up from 13.5 lakh crores to nearly 15 lakh crores. So that's more than 10% increase in capex. Some of this will come to defense. They haven't increased the subsidies at all. In fact, the food subsidy is the same. The fertilizer subsidy is 4,000 crores less than last year, and the petroleum subsidy is insignificant now anyways. But they haven't increased subsidies. Pensions are same, 2,75,000 crores hasn't increased. So this is the same pension that they're planning to have next year. So this is great because you're not spending on stuff that perhaps is not as productive and moving it into stuff that is productive, more capex, more actually accelerated spending in whether it is agri benefits or others. So I think there's going to be a push across the board, and I don't want to say this with more enthusiasm than I should, because the budget is a lot of proposals, but not so much in terms of action. But in general, the focus here is, when we thought about this 3-4 days ago, what was the worst thing that we thought could happen in the budget was they announced a bunch of freebies. They announced more subsidies, 3,000 rupees for X and 4,000 rupees for Y. They did none of the sort. All the subsidies remain the same or are lower. And the investment in actual industry in pushing, whether it is fisheries or shipping or defense or manufacturing or general private sector capex, I think that is great. The government should not be the only source of capex. And to push private capex up, you need to push demand. The demand worldwide is simply missing. America is putting tariffs like today from Mexico and Canada, and we'll be next. We'll be somewhere, few weeks down the line. So you should not depend on exports to push ourselves further. What we should be doing is manufacturing more for our domestic economy. And if the government is trying to push that and pushing that big time, while at the same time creating a smaller deficit, this might actually be an interesting point, an interesting change point for the route going forward. The roadmap seems to be clear. The other part here is that look at the financials. Oh, by the way, they're going to reduce regulation. But okay, when they say that, it's more like we are thinking that we will reduce in sometime in the next 20 years. So it will start with a committee, and then the committee will suddenly have judges and extra Y and X and Y and Z. They will get people who come in to give their inputs. Everybody will say, don't tax us, don't regulate us. They'll say, well, we can't do that. So there's going to be a fight for the next 3 or 4 years. But at least they've kickstarted the process of saying, we want to reduce regulation in everything but finance. So financial regulation continues as is. Interestingly, the finance push may come from the fact that the government is not spending so much, reduces the amount of fiscal deficit. They're actually borrowing just about the same or less than they did last year. When governments borrow, they crowd out the private sector. So banks prefer to lend to the government than to anybody else because the government is safe. If you change the government borrowing or reduce the government borrowing, then there's more left for the private sector to borrow. And therefore, if you push private sector capex, the private sector can start getting loans at lower rates if the RBI were to cut rates. And I think the RBI will look at this favorably and say, well, you know what, we have had a slowdown. There is potentially an increase in consumption that needs to be funded and needs capex to be funded by the banks. Let's reduce the rates so that we can correspond to this, and inflation is in general very low. So I think this will change the way the dynamics of India from an interest rate perspective, kickstart a lower interest rate regime and kickstart private sector capex, which should be good for us. I say all this with a bias because we invest in the markets and we benefit from private sector capex, we benefit from consumption. What we don't benefit is if people put their money into FDs and don't do anything with it. So given the fact that that's also happening, as in there has been a silent push into more people into FDs, the only reason FDs will become unattractive is if interest rates fall. And one offshoot of this budget is that interest rates are going to fall. So to that extent, I think the stock market is going to become even more attractive, maybe 6 months or 8 months down the line. It has to go through its cycles. But yeah, there is a lack of freebies, and that's what I think is interesting in this budget.
So as you were thinking about this, talking about this, what came to mind was, I think over the last couple of months, there was suddenly a bit of a shift, which you in fact called out quite snarkily, where India became the only growth engine in the world other than the US to perhaps a struggling economy where things are at the moment slowing down, and who knows about the future and how these tariffs will impact us. Do you think this budget goes towards changing that narrative a bit? And the second question, which I always wanted to ask is, does the budget still deserve as much importance as it gets? Should we turn this into just another day? Should it have been done on Monday? And should we just make this an announcement rather than an event?
You know, the first part of it was about, I think what you mentioned was, wait, let me ask you again. What was the first part?
The first part was that people have changed their opinion on India from being this dynamic economy to perhaps one facing a slowdown.
Yes, I think that let's address that. Little bit of an elephant in the room problem, because how did anything from the UBS comes on TV and says India is the biggest growth engine in the world in December 2024, and in January 2024 writes a report saying there's a structural slowdown in India. So I'm like, wait, can you make up your mind, please? Because is it really the growth engine of the world, or is it just? So the answer to this is, I think a lot of it comes from a very localized, processes. People form their opinions based on stock market moves. So if the stock market was strong in December, which it was, people have made one set of views. Then suddenly it starts becoming weak in January because foreign investors exit, and suddenly our whole economy is different. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. There are parts of India that were going through a structural slowdown. There are parts of India that are booming like we have never seen before. We're seeing this, whether you look at transformers as an industry, whether you look at electronics manufacturing as an industry. All of these things are getting so much growth, that 100-150% per year, that it's almost ridiculous to imagine that we're in a slowdown. But at the same time, FMCG, people aren't buying more toothpaste because there are not many more teeth to clean. That I think is a problem at some point in terms of growth. So if you're looking at the 2000s saying, my God, these companies were growing at 40% a year at that time, they're not going to grow more than 4% a year, maybe 5 or 7% a year now. So you're looking at the wrong metrics, according to me. The other one is, consumption stocks. If you have more competition, then for a while, until demand comes up to meet all of these, so people like a Zomato will come in, but so will a Flipkart Minute, so will a Big Basket, so will a Swiggy and Zepto and all of that. Now when you suddenly have 7 people willing to deliver to you in 10 minutes flat at subsidized prices, people will not buy only from a Zomato or only from a Swiggy. They will just switch their purchases across. So there is more goods being purchased, but it's spread across a lot more people. So GST collections remain the highest ever. Consumption stocks are making their lowest ever margins. It makes sense. Competition is here. It's trying to broaden the landscape. I think that's also the lesson going forward. When more money comes in, the consumption increases, but it's not necessary that the companies that are leaders of today will be the leaders of tomorrow. So to the extent that there is a slowdown, it may be in impact that you think happens to existing large players, but it does not mean that the economy itself is slowing down. That means there are growth triggers that continue to exist, but the winners of them haven't come and taken on. It's the same as saying Nvidia owned the AI space until 3 days ago, when DeepSeek came and decided that it didn't own the AI space. So things can change. AI can grow. In fact, more AI has been used in the last 3 days than probably has ever been used in the last 1 year, simply because people took the same questions asked, DeepSeek asked, so they're doing this like crazy simply because there's competition, and Nvidia is getting stuck in this madness because they're saying, well, you don't need that kind of compute power anymore. I think that's the answer to this funda of whether India is actually dying or it's not. India is actually reaching a phase where our economy is fostering competition. The winners of the past will not be the winners of the future. The big guys of today will not be the big guys of tomorrow. And whether it's this budget or not, I think the spurring of Indian economic growth will happen because of domestic consumption. And that domestic consumption is just getting improved a little bit more. So I'm very positive about the economy. I'm not positive about all stocks, only a few. But I don't think this is a point to say, let's write off India forever. Sure, we didn't use AI, but in a year, you will be using Indians to make your AI programs work, to write and run your AI programs and technology, and everything that is sitting one layer on top of AI will probably be done in some format a company that's either resident Indian or has a bunch of people that are Indian in origin. So, I mean, I don't see that as a problem. But the second question.
Does the budget still deserve to be an event, or should it just be an announcement?
Yes, and we sit here on a Saturday. Nobody wants to work on a Saturday, other than maybe some certain CEOs of companies, which I will not name. But I feel here that we do ourselves a disfavor by doing this. I mean, why would you have open a market on a Saturday? You could wait till Monday. It's not going to change anything if something comes out on February 3rd rather than today. Imagine the number of people that have to go in today and change their customs software, because customs duties apply from today night onwards, means February 2nd onwards. So America has already done this yesterday by changing tariffs in Canada and all from today onwards. So some poor customs person has to be sitting and putting 25% tariffs to all products from Canada and Mexico midnight of Friday, which is not a greatest time to be working. But then you can't, America's America, so you're not going to, I don't care about them as much as I care about the fact that we are now working on a Saturday and believing in a market where there are no FIs and no mutual funds to give us feedback about a policy that probably won't be impactful till April in the first place, and is likely to see some changes anyhow. I feel, and think about it. So many budget announcements are not on the budget anymore. The corporate income tax cut from 33% to 25% was done in September. There was no budget then. GST happens every month outside of the budget completely. A lot of other announcements, whether they are tinkering with gold duty or other customs duty announcements, can happen anytime in the year. All you want to know is how much money have I given which department, how much to spend. And even that can be changed at different points in the year as long as you get parliamentary approval. I think it's fine to do this without, like, it's like this meeting could have been an email. This budget could have been a document, and it is a document. And we go through this. There's this complex thing that happens at the India-Wagah border between when there's a closing of the gate, where it has now become it has moved from a point where they're just closing the gate to a symbolic, thing of almost my marching is stronger than your marching for almost absolutely no reason whatsoever. So sometimes we are doing these things because they were done in the past with some kind of tradition, but we don't have to. And I think your point about working on Saturdays when you've been under the weather is a testament to that. We don't need this. We just have to run business as usual, and this is not usual. So we should just recognize that and just do less of this budget thing. And I hope this video is as perhaps forceful about that, because in the end we talked so much, but we left you nothing more than I get 10,000 rupees more per month to spend or invest.
Very true, but I do think that the second order consequences of this will actually be fairly meaningful. And if it results in a lower interest rate, now that's very interesting.
Yeah.
But thanks so much, Deepak.
It was fun. Thanks, Shray.
Well, that's the episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how we can manage your money for you, do visit capitalmind.in to find out about our PMS service, where we can manage your money if you have more than 50 lakhs to invest, and our AIF, where the minimum is 1 crore. Till next time.